From the Sky News Centre, this is Paul Murray Live.
Thank you, Sherry. Happy Monday, wherever you happen to be. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Heroes walk amongst us. They do it each and every day in our emergency services. Can we focus in on what we mentioned at the start of last night's show? A hero police officer in Sydney, a person who was doing traffic duty when someone came up from behind and is alleged to have stabbed them twice in the back of the head. I can now tell you who the police officer is because, believe it or not, he's actually out of hospital tonight. Elvis Power is his name. His dad collected him from hospital today. Smiling face, representing our community and keeping us safe. This bloke is unbelievable. Now, the person who is believed, has been, I should say, accused of the stabbing has now been formally charged. But I want to give you some detail here because this is extraordinary what took place. Now, think about this in any other line of work, but certainly that this was a very targeted effort because one person was the police officer, one person wasn't. Very simple, right? Today, the police commissioner gave us a little bit of information about exactly what happened while Elvis was working traffic patrol in the middle of Sydney on a Sunday afternoon.
We will allege at about 1:10 p.m. yesterday afternoon, whilst officers were conducting duties on the corner of Castlereagh and Park Street, that an unprovoked attack occurred where an officer was struck from behind by an offender, currently charged and before the court. However, we will allege that he was in possession of a knife and stabbed the officer in the back of the head at least 2 times, causing 2 skull fractures.
Extraordinary. Now, apart from the fact that this assault is alleged to have taken place, what about Elvis, the pride of his family and the pride of the police force? Despite the fact that he had been stabbed twice in the back of the head, he continued to chase the bloke with the knife.
He was chased down by the victim offender and another officer, and shortly after, other officers arrested the offender on Elizabeth Street. As I said, he was charged, bail refused and put before the court. He appeared at court this morning and has been bail refused until the 9th of July, as I understand.
What a superhuman thing to do. That he literally was so selfless. Elvis was not thinking about himself who had been stabbed. Instead, I'm going to get him. That is phenomenal. Now, people have spoken to Elvis. No doubt, hopefully you'll get the chance to give interviews in the next couple of days. But this show is pro-cop. And we're pro-cop because of people like Elvis, who in a moment goes from taking care of traffic, becoming a victim, and then chasing down the attacker. What a champion.
I spoke to both those officers since yesterday, and one officer has been in hospital, as you can imagine, and was under observation, and the other officer is at home. They are doing well. I have commended them for their actions, their courageous actions yesterday in what, as I said, we will allege was an unprovoked attack.
Constable Elvis Power, you are amazing. He's out of hospital. He'll take obviously a few days to recover, and then he's back keeping people safe. Thank you for what you do, mate. Thank you for your service. Thank you to everyone in the police services all around the country. It is the toughest job, and you are the heroes amongst us. Well done. Meantime, huge news today is that police, specifically in New South Wales, decided to swoop on not dozens but hundreds of people who are believed to be significant domestic violence offenders in and around New South Wales. This was phenomenal to see all of this take place today. The message to abusers, pretty bloody clear.
Something has to give. These offenders have got to get the message that abuse of females is not acceptable. Domestic violence is not acceptable. And we will not stop in our operation.
Now, compare this to the week as proverbial actions of National Cabinet, when all the politicians that will pat the police officers on the back today had an opportunity to get together to agree on a piece of legislation that guaranteed that anyone with form still before the courts on potential domestic violence charges should have their bail revoked, refused, no example of it. Instead, no, everyone bought the headline of the $5,000 payment, which, by the way, doesn't kick in until not July this year, July next year. empty promises. And we all know when it comes to the Prime Minister, he bullied his way onto the stage at a rally of people demanding more action. He made the organiser cry, but she, of course, has now been pushed into hiding because once you cross this Prime Minister, he wishes you well, as do his supporters in the media and on social media. Now, Australia has got too many people coming into the country too frequently. This has been the case for years, but particularly since the Albanese government came to power. We've given you the numbers, we've given you the data. And one person notices this and is going to do something about it should he become the Prime Minister. Peter Dutton. He, of course, last week in his budget and reply speech said there is going to be a significant reduction in immigration. Why? Because there's an awful lot of problems that come with more people being added to the queues of housing and hospitals and schools and all the rest of it. There will still be more than 100,000 people who've got skills to come into the country, but we're going to tap the brakes. Now, of course, this has sent the lefties absolutely nuts. We begin with the Treasurer, whose entire budget plan is based off the Ponzi scheme of tipping in hundreds of thousands more new people who pay tax. Bugger where they live, bugger the pressures on the streets, bugger the pressures on the society. Here's the Treasurer telling us why Peter Dutton's got a bad idea.
It'll cost the economy billions of dollars, but even the kinds of estimates that you will see are conservative because it's not possible to fully capture the damage that Peter Dutton would do to the skills base of this country, to our hospitals, on our building sites, the sorts of things that he hasn't thought through.
Again, not a total stop in immigration. They're just going to make it seem like that. Instead, it's going to be a significant reduction in the number. There's still going to be 100,000 people coming in each and every year for a couple of years. That is the numbers required to be the nurses and to be the sparkies and to be the engineers. And it doesn't take long that when it's an idea that's put up by the Liberal Party, it's racist, according to the Greens.
Don't get sucked in by the racist trope from Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party.
Now, where was this, the economy's going to collapse and it's lots of racism, when the Labor Party, the Prime Minister and his clueless immigration minister, as well as clueless Claire O'Neill, the Home Affairs Minister, was announcing, what was it? Oh, that's right, that they were going to halve the number of people coming into the country. Now, while Peter Dutton is planning to go even further, where was the scream of racism? Where was Jim Chalmers saying, don't do it because you'll destroy the economy? Of course, it's all rubbish. Instead, it's where normal people are, that people understand that when you get up early, sit on a motorway, squint because the sun's in your eyes, and then do the same thing as you're coming home, that there's a lot of people here. When you go to look for a rental property, there's lines around the block. When people are bidding for houses, you are bidding against hundreds of thousands of people who were not in the country just a couple of years ago. This is not an argument against immigration. It's an argument about not adding to the problem. For his part, Peter Dutton says the advantage of his policy is more people will be able to buy a house because fewer people will be competing for the house.
The Prime Minister is making the housing crisis much, much worse. And Australians need homes now. We believe that by rebalancing the migration program and taking decisive action on the housing crisis, the Coalition can free up almost 40,000 additional homes in the first year and well over 100,000 homes in the first 5 years.
And as much as the Greens are going to hate it and Nasty Nicky's going to hate it and all of the other gallery people that hate this idea or will try to turn it into, he's not stopping immigration, he's reducing immigration. Guess where the Australian people are? The poll that we showed you last night, I'm going to drive home again for you here this evening. In the Resolve Political Monitor, which is the fancy way of saying the poll that turns up in the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, the Channel 9 newspapers, 50% of Australians currently believe that the amount that are coming in this year, which is the next year, is too high. The poll before that said that it was too high. The poll before that, in July last year, said that it was too high. The poll before that, in November 2021, said that it was too high. And also, if that doesn't float your boat, that you think there's something wrong with that polling organisation, what about the one that appears in the Turnbull Times? The Essential Research Report, which is the polling used in The Guardian. It says 59% of people believe in a cap on migration, i.e. Peter Dutton's idea, to help housing. Now, interestingly as well, to note here, is that one of the other things that Peter Dutton is going to be putting in place, which you notice none of the media want to talk about because they know how popular it will be. Peter Dutton is going to, in the first couple of years of his prime ministership, whenever that may well come about, he will stop foreign investors being able to bid for Australian homes. And anyone who has gone through a scenario of trying to bid for a house at auction any time in the past 20 years, let alone the past couple of years, knows it is you versus a lot of mysteries about where the money is coming from, and people who have migrated to the country or born in the country are not able to buy because of the foreign money that is washing around. Now, by the way, I actually went back and had a look through the Treasury statistics on this, and they try to hide it, but I worked it out today. How's this? $6.6 billion worth of real estate, residential real estate, was bought by overseas investors last year. Now think about it, if it's $1 million properties, well, how many of those can you get for $6.6 billion? For a couple of years, fewer people competing with you at an auction, and you're not competing against foreign buyers with limitless money that they're trying to hide from offshore. It's a brilliant idea. It's an idea that will absolutely connect with Australians, which means the press gallery, the media, the Labor Party, they'll all have to turn around and call it racist. Because God forbid you should be able to buy a house in Australia, that it should be easier for your kids or your grandkids to buy a house in Australia. Meantime, it's not even a week since the federal budget, and no one's talking about the federal budget anymore. Now, remember, the whole idea was that this is a big scene setter, a change in political fortunes. It wasn't even a week since we showed you the awkwardness of this last week in the lead up to the budget. Out of sympathy for you, I will not replay the audio, but it was funny. Now, of course, the budget was too little too late tax cuts and a power bill credit that you won't notice. But one thing that was also in the budget that nobody noticed until this weekend was that the Prime Minister is getting a brand new private jet. Yay! Bas Albo gets to keep flying around in an even bigger and more comfortable plane. There's one for a minister, and there's ones for the Governor-General as well. But you should be happy with your $36 a week and your $25 a month power bill. $450 million being spent on private jets for the kids who don't care. So Airbus Albo currently calls the Prime Ministerial jet Toto 1. What will he call the new one? Will it be Toto 2, Toto 1.5? What will it be? As he swans from country to country, pretending he can't possibly answer questions about domestic policy while he's overseas. See how it works? All the money for them, all the gold stars for them. You get screwed over in the budget and they get private jets. No wonder the reviews of the budget weren't great. We told you that on the night of the budget, the day after the budget, and now less than a week after the budget, the polling is confirming exactly what we knew about the rubbish that was being peddled by the Prime Minister and the Treasurer. Oh, we're fixing cost of living, we're here to care. They're buying private jets for themselves. Now, according to this, 39% of voters say the budget will make inflation worse. If that's the case, interest rates go up. If interest rates go up, well, hell to pay for lots of people. Now, amazingly, the same number of 39% was exactly the amount that was shown in Newspoll as well. So two separate polling companies, about the same. 40% of people saying they expect interest rates to go up as a result of the idiocy of the Prime Minister buying private jets for himself and a Treasurer pretending that if they cut migration, it's good, but if the opposition cuts migration, oh, it's going to destroy the budget. However, there is Newspoll. And I've got to point out here that in Newspoll, things got ever so slightly better for the government. It was 51-49, it is now 52-48, meaning that they would be able to form a minority government or get close to forming a government in their own majority. But that's only one poll. In fact, in the Financial Review poll, it says that the Liberal Party vote is at 40%. If that's the case, it's very competitive. Labor is at just 32%, which means their two-party preferred, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, is 50-50. And if you think, well, no, news polls, that's the only one you've got to follow, have a look at this graph. Each little dot is the two-party preferred number that's gone since March of 2023 through to April now. The direction for the government is from the top left-hand corner to under 50%. Kos Samaras, who is a pollster but used to work for the Labor Party, says this. Labor's primary vote shows more fluctuation because a portion of their support base is undecided, wavering between voting for Labor or a minor party or an independent. This variability could shift from month to month. His suggestion is it's not going to the Liberals, instead it's going into anything but, which could lead into minority government. Some media coverage today fails to grasp this trend. If the economic situation deteriorates, for these type of voters, this trend could significantly worsen. Geez, it's almost like we've been saying that all the time. And why? Because 77% of Australians are currently living under a cost of living pressure. That's at finder.com.au. Most people don't think the economy gets better, and if it does, it's ever so slightly. And remember, even if the Reserve Bank does eventually cut interest rates, their prediction for 2026 is that you will still be paying 75% of the increases in your interest rates since Albo became Prime Minister and Jim Chalmers became Treasurer. Now, another little issue here that we've got to point out here, which is the Prime Minister, heavily distracted, last year spent $450 million on a referendum that Australians went from hell yes to hell no. Every day he campaigned, it got worse. The expectation was in term one, the voice to Parliament, that would make him a historic figure. In term two, Australia would become a republic and then he would be a Labor hero forever. Now, of course, the way that he signalled that that was the case was because he made a bloke called Matt Thistlethwaite the Minister for the Republic. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, on what? I don't know. I don't know if it came with any staff or it was just a title so he can debate on Radio National. Peter Van Onselen in the Daily Mail says when there is a reshuffle of this government and inevitably people like Andrew Giles get the heave-ho from immigration, perhaps Clueless Claire or, if we can hope, lots of other people go, guess what job's going to disappear? The Minister for the Republic, because even Anthony Albanese knows, after spending $450 million on a yes-no question that he lost, Australians have no interest in doing that any time in the future, and a Republic referendum, well, it would cost even more, wouldn't it? So alas, his beachhead of becoming a Labor hero will disappear, and not before time. Now, you know I can't stand the Queensland government. Its Premier, Stephen Miles in particular. Why? Because they've driven the joint into the ground. Now, I love Queensland, and if I could have the blood transfusions to become a Queenslander, I would. But take your pick. From youth crime to a whole bunch of other issues, this bloke is cooked. And this bloke is cooked at the upcoming election. And one of the biggest reasons why is because of what the Labor Party has done to the hospitals and the ambulance services in Queensland. Labor have been in power, with the exception of 3 years, for the best part of 30 years in Queensland. Queensland has an opportunity in a few months to get a new broom and actually fix their problems. And they're going to have to do something because, despite the fact that they changed the minister and they changed the spin and they've got the social media videos and they've got the new Premier, ambulance ramping, the amount of time that an ambulance spends with a person in the back not being able to drop them off at a hospital is now at record levels. Never been worse. In the March quarter, 45.5% of Queensland patients spent more than 30 minutes on a ramp waiting to go into hospital. So how's about that? 45% of people who go into an ambulance stay in an ambulance because there's no room at the hospital for at least 30 minutes. This is unbelievable. They have had billions of dollars and decades to do something, and the union's on their side, but it's never been worse. And while you may think, I haven't had to call O, it's not my problem, it's just for Fred and Mary down the street, well, one day it is you. One day it is your partner, your kid, your parents. And you deserve a hospital system where the ambulance can drop you off, you're taken care of in the hospital, and more importantly, the ambulance can go and pick up somebody else. How many times did we tell you at the end of last year about the number of people who died because of the hospitals and the ambulance ramping in Queensland? Well, since then, it's got worse. Well done to the Courier Mail, who've had particular focus on the data because Queensland Health and the Labor Party do their best to try to hide it. Well done to Chris Jones and the team here, who, again, under the banner of Queensland Health shows 45% of patients waiting outside in their editorial today. This set of figures, while understandably damaging for the government, at least gives Queenslanders a complete picture of the efficiency of our health system, or should I say lack thereof. It might even be used to inform decisions when requiring hospital care. Regular releases of the same data sets government to be able to, rather than hide from the truth, actually give the public information that matters. Yes, occasionally it'll be damaging for a governor or a minister, but bugger it, so be it. Instead, what they do is they used to do these things monthly, and then they move them quarterly, and then they go back to monthly, and then they hide it on a website, and then they do a press release, and then they only put it in the annual report. Everything they can to try to hide this information from Queenslanders. But anyone in Queensland knows, you call 000, it may or may not turn up. In regional Queensland, as we've told you the stories, people who've called 000, the paramedic turns up, and if you need to go into the back of the ambulance and the paramedic needs to take care of you, because there's no other paramedic in the passenger seat, a family member might have to drive the freaking ambulance. Get rid of this mob. Get rid of them so cleanly. Because they don't deserve a day longer in power, and Queensland deserves way better than the rubbish being served up by Miles and the rest of his merry men and women who are fools, who are great at politics but terrible at public administration. One of the conversations du jour at the moment is in and around social media, and particularly the effects that it's having on our kids. The Herald Sun, the Daily Telegraph, the Adelaide Advertiser and the Courier Mail today are getting behind a great campaign which is saying, let them be kids. It is a campaign that is all about making sure that we keep kids away from social media until they're really quite advanced teenagers. And even then, we all know you should stay away from this as far as you want. Now, of course, this should have been dealt with by National Cabinet when they were meeting a few weeks ago, but they couldn't even agree on bail laws about domestic violence. This, of course, should be a priority for a federal government to get all state governments together, but no, state governments have to go it alone. Peter Malinauskas says that it's 14-year-olds. It's the first time you should be able to have a social media account, but in New South Wales they're going to go one better. And Chris Minns plays all other Labor leaders off a break as a bloke who understands it and gets on with it. Now, he could do a lot more when it comes to bail laws, sure, but on social media, this bloke is exactly where it should be. He's going to have a summit in the next little while so he can get all of the input, but he's wanting to get towards a full ban on social media access for anyone under the age of 16. First, the media summit.
We've decided to hold social media summit so we can get the experts around the table. We can look at legislative change, reforms in this space to keep kids safe, to arm parents with the information they need to make the best decisions for their children.
And again, if he's floating right now that the plan is that kids only over the age of 16 will have access to social media, that is what will end up being the outcome.
I think it is the right age, or at least the limit. Now, there'd be a lot of 16-year-olds where even that isn't old enough, to be honest with you, when you consider what you're exposed to as a result of being on social media. I've got to make a decision about whether that's enforceable at the state level. It'd be better if we could do it at a national level.
Now, I want you to think about social media the same way that you think about a casino. No natural light, no clocks, and essentially it's a system to release dopamine, the thing that sets off in our head little feelings of goodness. Now, social media works just like a casino. Once you're in, the business is about keeping you there. Now, there are great documentaries and lots of them all over, and any of them you can find, I want them to show them to yourself and then have a look to teenage kids or grandkids. It's about how, frankly, evil these companies can be sometimes. And I think the reality is that adults have got a problem with social media. I certainly know that I've spent too many nights looking at reels. So you know what I've done? I delete the app. Every couple of weeks I'll remember, oh yeah, that's right, Instagram, and I'll go and have a look. But I'm not on there all day, every day, constantly just searching for distraction. And the truth is, when it comes to our kids, when they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, they don't have a job. So the only way they get access to a smartphone is if we buy them one. Now, there's technology that exists that means you can buy a dumb phone. If you're one of those people who believes that after your kid starts catching the train or the bus that you should be able to call them and they should be able to call you, there are phones where you can go into anything from Harvey Norman through to the telcos, and they will sell you a phone that's got the numbers on it, and that's it. There's even ones with no cameras on it. That's what we need to be giving our kids. When we turn around and give them the casino in their hand, are we ever surprised that they get lost in it? Oh, but my friend's got one. Yeah, okay, I get it. But I certainly know we're having the conversation with our kids as they're starting to feel the pressure, and I can't believe it. When I've got a kid in year 3 who's starting to have the chat about the phone, it's not happening. Because this is a destructive force. Now, if you're at home and you want to watch things on YouTube with them, and if you want to look at other things, maybe on the adult phone, okay, that's your business. But giving the kid the device that you then 2, 3, 4, 5 years later say they're addicted to, well, just like any other form of addiction, from gambling to drugs to booze, it's not just about your exposure to it. It's not just about your experimentation with it. It's because somebody gave you the opportunity to try it. Now, to give you another idea about just how addictive and just how weird people get when they're teenagers and their phones, again, one of the stories in the Daily Telegraph, the Herald Sun, the Courier Mail and the Adelaide Advertiser, as well as the Hobart Mercury, talks here about the problems when you take a phone off a kid. They start screaming, they start shouting, and some of them even get violent. I'm going to read a bit here, so hopefully you're comfy, that some teens are so addicted to social media and online gaming platforms that they're pulling out knives on their parents when the Wi-Fi gets turned off. A psychologist who helps treat technical addiction, can you believe it? Technical addiction, said some extreme cases of children were smashing doors, shouting and showing dysregulation behaviour, which means they go nuts. And the troubling behaviour is starting even younger. This year, Triple P parenting surveys finding that parents admit that 1 in 3 toddlers aged 2 and under are hooked on screen-based play. Now, have I been guilty of putting a screen in front of my kids? You bet. But this stuff really is a kick in the backside to all of us who have the capacity to keep a device out of a kid's hand that they can't buy. You watch the behaviour of people when they're out. The first thing they do when a young child is restless in a restaurant or a cafe, they hand them a phone. That addiction then continues as they get older, often impacting on their schooling and their mood control, with parents forced to seek professional help. How many times do we sit here and say the kids aren't all right? And there's a lot of different things that make our kids not all right. There's garbage being poured into their ears at school, and the pressure about the world's going to end and everything's racist and the country you shouldn't be proud of. But one thing you and I can control as parents, you and I can control as grandparents or guardians, is don't give them a smartphone until they are ready to use it, and they're not ready at primary school. And good on the New South Wales government for moving towards a place where not until you're deep into high school will you be able to access social media, which, I repeat, is like a casino. You wouldn't let your kid drink, you wouldn't let your kid smoke, you wouldn't let your kid gamble. Why would you let your kid muck around on social media? Now, a couple of quick things here, including in the United States. Now, I always love when the media can't help but show what side they're on. And one of the current narratives that's running around that all Republicans must be asked is, do they agree with Donald Trump that no matter what happens, there are questions that may well result, and then not believing the results of the 2024 election? Remember, Trump said this.
Donald Trump is making it clear he is only ready to accept the results of the election if he likes them, telling the Milwaukee Journal, quote, "If everything's honest, I'll gladly accept the results. I don't change on that. If it's not, you have to fight for the right of the country."
Well, again, one of the people that was asked one of these questions over and over again, because that's the only question you can ask a Republican, was Marco Rubio, running for re-election in the Senate in Florida. Well, he decided to turn the tables back onto the reporter who's clearly asking the campaigning points of the Democrats. And I say, well done, little Marco.
Will you accept the election results of 2024 no matter what happens, Senator? No matter what happens? No, if it's an unfair election, I think it's going to be contested by either side.
Senator, no matter who wins.
I think you're asking the wrong person. The Democrats are the ones that have opposed every Republican victory since 2000. Every single one.
No Democrat has refused to concede. Hillary Clinton conceded. Senator, will you accept the election result?
Hillary Clinton said the election was stolen from her and that Trump was illegitimate. Kamala Harris agreed.
Senator,
we have Democrats now.
Senator, she conceded the election.
She said that Trump was illegitimate. She said that the election had been stolen. Kamala Harris agreed. By the way, there are Democrats serving in Congress today who in 2004 voted not to certify the Ohio electors because they said those machines had been tampered with. And you have Democrats now saying they won't certify 2024 because Trump is an insurrectionist and ineligible to hold office. So you need to ask them. I think you've had have you ever asked a Democrat this question on your show? I bet you've never asked a Democrat that question.
I'm sorry, Senator, we're running out of time, which is exactly what she went on to say. Well done to Senator Rubio. Now, remember last week when Donald Trump, for some reason, was talking about Hannibal Lecter, the serial killer from the Silence of the Lambs movies?
Silence of the Lambs. Has anyone ever seen the Silence of the Lambs? The late, great Hannibal Lecter is a wonderful man. He oftentimes would have a friend for dinner. Remember the last scene? Excuse me, I'm about to have a friend for dinner as this poor doctor walked by. I'm about to have a friend for dinner, but Hannibal Lecter, congratulations, the late, great Hannibal Lecter. We have people that are being released into our country that we don't want in our country.
None of them are Hannibal Lecter. But as Trump is about to go back into court, Michael Cohen, again under cross-examination, and the expectation is as soon as this week, the jury will start meeting to decide whether he is guilty or not guilty. On the evidence, there is no crime, but of course it's a New York jury where, 90% all voted Democrat, so we'll all see what happens. But somebody decided to have a joke with this, and it was Saturday Night Live, who was accidentally actually funny, merging together the vice presidential pick and the Hannibal Lecter of it all. But also, I like this bloke doing a pretty good Trump impersonation outside of court.
And thank you for coming to visit me in my cage at the zoo. I'm really enjoying these post-court press conferences in this very weird and depressing hallway. I don't like being in court because they say very mean things about me while I am trying to sleep.
I like it, very clever. All right, and as for Joe Biden, he didn't have an amazing weekend. He went to a historically black college, and Gaza followed him there.
I look down and see the rose around my wrist. And education makes you free, and Morehouse education makes you fearless. On Sunday, he rose again. But
if young people don't vote for him, he doesn't stay president. Quick break. Back with more. Lots to talk about here on Paul Murray Live. A great debate. Sam Crosby, Matt Canavan. Ding, ding. We're just getting started. Thanks very much for watching us this Monday night here on Paul Murray Live. Senator Matt Canavan, future Senator Sam Crosby, that's the way it should be. They're joining us now here for a ding-dong about everything around today. So I'm going to start with you, Sam. Help me out about what the talking point is here about Peter Dutton and immigration cutbacks, OK? So when the federal government promises to halve its own immigration number, fine for the economy, when Peter Dutton promises to go a little bit further, that'll destroy the economy. How does it work?
But he's already banked the half, and then this is further on that. Yeah. Look, that's not the point. That's not.
But that's Chalmers' talking point.
And I got to give 4 points to Peter Dutton for knocking the government off message. Within 48 hours or 72 hours of their budget. It's not easy in opposition to do that.
The budget didn't last a week.
Quite genuinely, that was impressive. I have to say though, I think it's an overly simplistic message that I think will resonate immediately with people, and people say, yeah, that is a good point. And then they'll think about it a little bit more, and the realisation will kick in. I mean, for God's sakes, if it was seriously this simple to solve housing problems, to solve congestion, to solve everything else, you don't think Labor would do this?
But the reason they don't is because of the Ponzi scheme that is more population equals more taxpayers equals, we're in surplus.
Well, no, I mean,
the skills. Dutton's not saying no to immigration. Dutton's saying no, like we're going to bring it down a bit more. So you've still got 100,000 skilled workers coming in.
But you still need more, right? We still have thousands upon thousands of unmet need in the thing. But what about family resolution? So in the last government, the family reunification wait time was about 30 years.
I'll be honest, fine by me.
Dude, come on. I had...
I think family reunion, people take the piss.
No, sorry. I had a guy that I used to work with.
You come here because you've got skills, and then we'll bring everyone else out.
I had a guy who used to work with Vinnie's. His mum was in France. He immigrated here 20 years ago. He's an only child. He wanted to bring her over. Couldn't. Just flat out couldn't. He was like very well paid in a former career, had all the money in the world to support his... He wasn't asking for anything of that. Couldn't. 30-year wait list. I mean, come on, it's just not right to not be able to bring your mum over or your dad over.
What? And then Medicare and then aged care on top of all of that. That's why I have my issue.
No. So increase the amount that you need to be able to support them. I mean, there are ways around this that we can still have...
financially no drain whatsoever, then we can start a chat.
Sure. But but that's not what Peter Dutton's saying. Peter Dutton's saying 25% cut, boom. 1 in 4, boom. You're done.
And you know...
But hold on, but he's also not saying where the number's going to come from, is he? He hasn't said, family reunification, that's gone. Skilled migrant, that's gone.
Fair.
Fill the details out for me a little bit, and then we can have more of a conversation.
But Senator, I thought he did put some categorisation on it, but get into it, Senator.
Yeah.
Fill the gap that I don't know.
Well, he has said we would reduce the refugee intake back to its long-term average of just over 13,000 a year.
Excellent.
The rest will be a cut to the broader permanent migration rate. I mean, the key difference now between the government and the opposition is the government's just saying we'll reduce the flow into the country, the net overseas migration. We'll, of course, do that as well. But what we'd also do is reduce the number of people transitioning from a visa through to permanent migration. That means some people will go home. And so that will add ease. That will add additional ease to the housing market here. Now, the simple fact is both parties now agree that migration needs to come back, although Jim Chalmers seems to be off on his own planet that this is a terrible thing. But the Prime Minister and the opposition leader think that. The key now for the Australian people leading up to the election is who do you trust to do that? The Labor Party, over the past 2 years, have botched the reopening of Australia's border post-COVID. We had to open our border. We'd had taken no one in for over 2 years. But they let the floodgates open and completely lost control of our border. Now, once the horse has bolted, they're saying, look, trust us, we'll close it now. Well, I don't think that the Australian people are going to put a lot of trust and faith in the very mob who have lost control of the border to start with. So we definitely need to do this now, and it's just a matter of trust. Who do you trust? Peter Dutton, who was a very strong migration minister, understands the system. I think it's time he gets put in charge of our border so we fix this up and alleviate some of the stresses that are occurring in our housing markets and on infrastructure in our major cities across Australia.
Yeah, again, can we just play the Jim Chalmers grab? Again, right, so when his government's pulling back, it's not the end of the world. When the Liberal Party plans to go a little bit further, it's the end of times. Have a look.
If you think about the relationship between migration and housing, for example, of the less than 5,000 homes purchased by foreigners in the most recent data, around 1,300 of them were established homes. And so this will make nowhere near the difference that he is claiming that it will, and that's because he hasn't thought it through. His budget reply was dark, it was divisive, intentionally so, and the net effect of all of that would be that he would destroy the budget and damage the economy.
But when you're doing, please. I actually think that one of the reasons why you've not heard Labor responding to the other shoe to drop when it comes to the housing market, which was to ban foreign buyers, is they don't know how to respond to it, right? $6.6 billion worth of foreign investment was made into the Australian property market, not the commercial market, that's the residential market, all right? If there's a house worth $1 million, you can imagine how many houses here, right? That was just in 1 year alone. I think that, to me, is the one that's actually going to move potential voting needles and the conversations of people nodding their heads around a barbecue. But, Sam, what do you think?
Look, I think it's actually an idea that's worth exploring. I do. I don't think governments should be so resistant to reject all ideas from the opposition simply because it comes from the opposition. I mean, look, frankly, I think the easier place to start on that are countries that don't allow Australians to buy
reciprocal rights.
Reciprocal rights.
Fair point.
So, if you can buy property in America, then sure, the Americans can.
But we can't in China, we can't in Japan.
But if there's other countries, then, well, no, you shouldn't be able to buy it here if our citizens can't go to your country and buy one there. Yeah. But I think it's an idea worth exploring.
Senator, again, you pick a poll, it all comes down the same way, that about 40% of people think that the budget is going to push up inflation. We all hope that they're wrong, but it's certainly a significant number of people who think that's the case. We'll see how many of them are in the room of the Reserve Bank in the next couple of weeks. But again, this budget, all the noise, all the carry-on, all the tax calculators, all the rest of it, the reality, I think, dawns on people here that average tax cut, $36 a week, average power bill credit, $25 a month. Prime Minister, not one but two new private jets.
Look, I think people understand this is a pretty cynical budget. It's an attempt to try and buy people's votes, and pretty obvious that that's what it is. I mean, do you remember a few years ago, the Gillard government had that Cash for You program? I think it was about $200 or $300, and they launched it. We're going to give you cash, and it was a hashtag Cash for You, and that went down like a lead balloon because, I mean, people I think get the fact that what the Labor Party has done here is they've failed to deliver on a promise of cheaper electricity. So they've taken your taxes that you pay them, you work for, you pay the government, then turn around giving you a little bit of that back. I'm sure most of your viewers pay more than $300 a year in taxes. They give you a little bit of it back and want thanks for it. I mean, that's the approach here, and I don't think people are that stupid. And that's why you're seeing the poll results like you are here today. I think most people see through this sort of stuff, the cynical exercises that politicians go through, and hopefully they do, because what our country needs is some leadership. We are living in pretty tough and interesting times, and we need some tough leaders willing to make tough decisions here and not simply tell the Australian people fairy tales that somehow green hydrogen is going to come along and save the day, that somehow handing out just cheques full of money is the way to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and make ourselves more wealthy. We've got to do hard things to become more productive, to become more wealthy and become more prosperous as a society. And unfortunately, the Labor government this week showing they can't do that and won't do that. So they don't, I think, have the right medicine for this country.
I was listening to the radio today and I heard one of the many, many ads that $40 million worth of taxpayer-funded advertising is going to be to talk about the tax cuts. Apparently the Made in Australia stuff, similar amounts, so the best part of, $80 billion is going to be spent, driving home two big messages for the government. When you were talking about, again, how people will respond to things like, even deeper cuts on immigration, do you think that Labor has got a winning hand when they say every household for power and every worker on tax cut, even though I'll argue on the is it enough?
Yeah, I don't know is the answer. I don't know. I kind of like that there is something unifying about it, in the same way that you can make the same case that people earning $1 million a year shouldn't get access to Medicare, but there is something beautiful and egalitarian about it that says, no. Everyone in Australia is entitled to a basic standard of healthcare. Everyone in Australia does get some sort of bill relief. Is there a more elegant way of doing it? Possibly and probably. But this is the model that they've gone for. I'm personally not going to complain when my power bill comes down by $300. And look, to Matt's point that this is all somehow a result of the
a vote-buying exercise.
Yeah, maybe they shouldn't have made that promise 2-3 years ago, but they did, and they were elected on that basis.
It wasn't a teensy tiny little one.
And people like you, Paul, have been on this show every single week saying, bring it down. So, who's the daddy? Who's the daddy of this thing, Paul?
The promise wasn't to deliver this cheaper power bills by using taxpayer dollars. I mean, we're borrowing this money. It's $3.5 billion in total. We've got to borrow it from overseas. Someone has to pay it back. So we are mortgaging our kids' futures, our grandchildren's future, to give ourselves a power bill cut, when what we were promised was that the government's investments in green energy would deliver this without having to do that, without having to mortgage our children's future. So what are we going to do here? We're going to keep giving ourselves $300 off each year now, forever? Because the promise was $300 off, and then it'll be $300 off forever, right? Because there'd be lower power bills forever. Are they going to do another $3.5 billion next year, another $3.5 billion after that? Soon enough, you're talking about real money. This is not the way to make our economy work better. Clearly, the government's energy policy has failed, and this week's handout of $300 is an admission of failure from the Labor government.
All right, quick break. Plenty more to talk about, including how the ABC accidentally burst the Canberra bubble. More in a sec here on Paul Murray Live. Every now and then it is good that people who talk about politics all day, every day, myself included, are reminded of how the actual world talks about politics. Sam Crosby is here with Matt Canavan, Senator Matt Canavan, and it was a poll done for the ABC where it says, can you name something from the federal budget? 16% of people said tax cuts, 30% of people said the energy stuff, but 48% of people said nope. Senator, again, it is a little reminder, and while I love that what we do in this conference, we can name and count the grains of sand on the beach, but every now and then we get a little reminder in the real world, well, budget, okay, you know, rightio, and ultimately they're the people who decide governments, don't they?
They are, and they're probably smarter than you and I, perhaps, Paul, because a lot of the budget's full of spin. I tell you what, it's. I don't think it's all that important to watch the budget because it is layers upon layers of spin. You've really got to read all 100 pages or a few hundred pages of papers to really understand it, and obviously people don't have that time. So, look, I don't begrudge people being disengaged here. I think people do get a general idea. I saw once that people only spend about 5 minutes a year thinking about politics, the average person. So it shows you the challenge that we've all got. But I do think, as I said before, that's why people come back to the fact that this is a tough time for families, tough time for Australia and the world. And in those times, they tend to reward governments that do show leadership. I think we saw that in COVID. And we're seeing that again. So I think the government's missing the mark here a little bit. In times of plenty, you can sort of get away with sometimes these types of handouts. People are just happy to have something and not too worried about the world. Right now, I think it's a different environment, and maybe the Treasurer and the Prime Minister should be taking tougher decisions. Yeah, and I mean, Sam, you're seeing this in the United States, right, where all the thinking people on television are saying, well, the latest data on the economy is this is amazing. Then you go and talk to people and they go, sorry, no, I can't pay this, I can't pay that. This poll, a little reminder, again, about all that detailed coverage and tax calculators that normal people are like, oh, okay.
Well, the US is a different kettle of fish because over there it's about turnout. So you've got to motivate your base.
You've got to rev them up, yeah.
Right, it's all about the turnout. That's 70% of what you map out who your likely voters are, and then you figure out how do we get those people to the polls. Over here, I mean, Matt's overly cynical, but I think he's onto something there. At the end of the day, the success of this budget will not be about whether or not people can name key agenda items or key
Did it change my life?
Exactly. If when they go to the polls in, 6 months, 12 months' time, do they think, no, I'm a little bit better off than I was 3 years ago? And all of those questions will come into it, from power prices to home prices to congestion. It'll all come in there.
That's why I constantly talk about too little, too late, but we'll all see what happens. All right, got about a minute here. Trump's back in court, but Cohen will be done by the end of the day. There might be another witness, but we could be at closing arguments by Thursday, which means off to the jury by Friday. Sam, are they going to find him guilty?
I think yes, absolutely.
Okay. Matt, do you think they're going to find him guilty, regardless of whether they should or shouldn't?
It's pretty hard to see a New York jury letting him off, I suppose. It won't be the end of it. Won't Trump try to drag this out, though? It seems every day he's in court, his polls go up. So maybe they'll call heaps of witnesses and just keep him in New York forever.
Well, and you want to talk about a cynical take? I reckon one of the reasons why he accepted the debate in June with Biden was because if there's guilty and we're getting to sentencing, he's going to say, don't throw me in the slammer. I've got a presidential debate coming up in June. So obviously the options are still there for fines or suspended jail sentences or, the punishment of house arrest in Trump Tower where you're with a supermodel in a golden building. Oh, please don't let me leave. Well, anyway, we'll all find out. Throughout the night tonight, more about Michael Cohen. You'll see it all again in the morning in First Edition. Thank you, lads. Do appreciate it. We'll talk again in a moment or two's time. All right, quick break. Plenty to do here on Paul Murray Live. I'm about to do the most dangerous thing you can do on television, which is wonder out loud. But let's give it a go. The Sydney Morning Herald is reporting this evening that half of all of the people who go to Sydney University are overseas students. Okay. Why don't we just do what we did in 2020, which is, sure, you can study from anywhere in the world from your place. You don't actually have to come and live here. Why don't they just do that, do the full fee paying that way? And we've solved the world's problems, right? Forward your complaints to Malcolm Turnbull.